Well, I'm welcomed today by Jeanette Sherman. Jeanette is Senior Product Marketing Manager with Mend.io. Welcome, Jeanette.
Hi there. It's great to talk to you.
Good to have you on. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about Mend.io.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm really the person who kind of keeps an eye on the voice of the customer and on the market and understanding what people care about in cybersecurity. So Mend, we really see ourselves as autopilot for AppSec. We are creating a platform where you can have the best of control and automation for your AppSec.
Excellent. Hot topic. Application security, AppSec. Good place to be. Well, we're talking a little bit about the new malicious packages special report that Mend created here recently, which you can download by going to the Mend.io site. It's a great report. Right. I've had a chance to read it myself. We're doing some work with you. Matter of fact, on some kind of follow-on research to that. So I do highly recommend it. That part wasn't written by us, but it is really great work. Well, tell us a little bit about kind of the thinking behind doing this kind of a special report. Why are malicious packages such a big issue?
Yeah, a lot of why they're such a big issue is because when people think application security, they're thinking CVEs, right? They're thinking about the vulnerability picture. And, and people have started to scan for those vulnerabilities. Now, if you're an attacker, you always want, kind of the path of least resistance to be able to deploy your attack. And as companies start to resist more, start to scan for vulnerabilities, identify those vulnerabilities, I say that having a vulnerability is kind of like having a busted lock on your back door. You could have that busted lock, and depending on where you live and everything, nobody might discover that for 5-10 years. But a malicious package is sort of like if you said to the burglar, I'm going to invite you inside. I think you're somebody who legitimately belongs in this house. I'm going to invite you in and you're going to have as long to be here as you want. And so a lot of attackers see that as a really promising vector, maybe more promising in a lot of ways than vulnerabilities. And our research team had started to identify more and more of these malicious packages. We realized that it was time to start really telling a differentiated story and talking to people about this emerging threat.
Yeah, it's kind of like all the locks on the building or the house or whatever. Any one of those could be a way that an external threat gets through. Yeah. In this case, they're breaking into the package manager and you're just simply downloading whatever the latest version is or a new package into your dev environment. So it is sort of an indirect, but then once inside, of course, now it's a direct threat to you.
Exactly.
It's interesting, because so much of our software too it's not all developed by us, right? There's different reports on what percentages or how much is actually our code, how much has been open source, third party, libraries, services, all of those kind of things, and they can be susceptible to.
Exactly. It's not just your direct dependencies, it's your transitive dependencies too, right? If one of these malicious packages gets into any of your code, it can do a lot of different things. We found in our research, some of these packages were exfiltrating user data. And depending on what industry you're in, this could pose a true existential risk to a company.
Interesting. Well, we'll dive into the report a little bit more, the research that you did. Love to hear some of your thoughts on what some of the things that you discovered, what things are kind of increasing in the growth of malicious packages.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that we saw is that just the number of malicious packages is swelling kind of unbelievably fast. We saw a 315% increase in malicious packages year on year from 2021 to 2022. And the big takeaway, I feel like, from something like that is if what you've been doing up until now about malicious packages is saying, you know what, this isn't that big of a problem. We don't need to have a response to this threat. It's so small. You're not going to be able to keep getting away with that. A year or two more of growth that looks like this, and all of a sudden, that's what you're going to find these malicious packages have already gotten into your code and are doing who knows what. Another of the kind of surprising things that we discovered when we turned on a new product functionality that could detect malicious packages that were already in legacy existing code bases. So, code that had been developed without using any kind of detection tool for malicious packages. When that functionality was turned on, we discovered that there were thousands of these packages already inside people's code that had no idea. We were sending emails out immediately to customers, letting them know that the invader is already in your house.
Or the proverbial camel's nose is under the tent. Matter of fact, a good part of the camel is already under the tent.
Yes,
much more than the nose. It's pretty amazing. And that kind of a number, 315%, does get your attention, which just shows you. I don't know if we're increasingly using packages as well, but that is a major threat factor for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And packages are being updated more frequently. People are using more of them. They're using more and smaller packages. And a lot of these, the way that malicious packages get in the first place is by pretending to be something they're not, right? They're all imposters. Maybe they're using typo squatting, so that you think that something that is a capital I, you think that it's a lowercase L. You think a hyphen should be an underscore, and so you download the wrong version. But it's not always about fooling humans. Sometimes this is actually about fooling package managers, right? There's some of these that a human would actually detect quicker if a package manager thinks higher version number equals newer version equals better. Let me automatically update that for you. And the version number is, 42.69.420. Most people would look at that and say, no, those numbers don't seem like that's a serious, real package. But the package manager is trying to be smart and ends up being dumb and bringing that malicious package on board.
It's interesting. And just something as simple as typo squatting. I heard one the other day, two N's next to each other oftentimes look like an M. So as you're, skimming by reading text, it's easy to gloss over those things and not realize that, wait a minute, that looks kind of fishy. So
right. And everybody's in a hurry. This is why when we created our malicious package protection, we knew that part of what we needed to do with that was actually just block it from ever coming in. If those packages are identified, you didn't notice that two N's became an M. Well, this noticed it. This is reading it. This is detecting all of those malicious packages, and it's enforcing that policy. So you just can't get that into your code base.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that. Now, this isn't specific to the report, but I'd love to hear some more about Mend. It isn't we can scan our code once a month. We can scan our code every once in a while. We've got to fill out a compliance report. As much as we're creating, integrating, continuously building, continuously deploying, delivering code, this has to be a part of the process of how we build it, not a secondary step we do once in a while when we feel like we might want to check it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, at Mend.io, we keep telling people the best time to enforce policies, it's in the repository and you enforce on push. Basically, you can detect, are there critical vulnerabilities? Are there malicious packages? Are there license types? Is somebody putting a GPL license in this that's going to cause problems for us later on down the line? And I heard from somebody recently, he said, I can buy whatever tool, I have the budget, I can buy whatever tools my devs need, but I can't force them to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that is actually, that's where you're wrong. And that's what companies, really need to get involved in with best practices, is enforcing this on push, making sure that there's kind of no way within your development processes to avoid that security step, so that it's being done all the time and just as part of your development.
Well, anytime you interrupt that cognitive, focus of the developer, anybody else doing that kind of real deep thought work, they don't want to use something that's going to get in the way. Like every time I have to remember to do this, or there's 5 extra steps, or even 2 extra steps, versus when I do a push that happens automatically. It'll let me know if there's an issue.
And with Mend, we figured that out about, this kind of cognitive friction, as we call it. And we really made it so that you can do everything from the repository, whether that's, looking at more detailed information about what you've discovered, whether that's implementing a fix in your repository. You shouldn't ever have to leave that and go to a separate UI, and part of kind of the deal you make with developers when you say, okay, you don't get to skip these steps anymore. okay, well, yeah, but you've got to make it easy on the developers. You can't make it harder on them or you're going to get a rebellion.
Yeah, that won't last very long. They push back and hard. I'm curious. So when folks don't have something like Mend in place, what are the alternatives? What do you do if you don't have a Mend today?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of what I think of as really painful and bad ideas out there. So some people are just restricting their open source really, really hard. I talked to somebody pretty recently where their company was doing this. They said, we have one specific open source license type, and within that, we're going to allow this. If you want anything else to be approved, here's a forms-based approvals process, right? This is a very irritating thing to have to go through. And I said, this sounds like it probably makes people upset and doesn't work very well, and it makes everything slow. He's like, well, yeah, we're not hitting our deadlines. We're not hitting what we promise. We're not releasing on time. And I said, well, don't you want to use more open source? He says, yeah, but from our perspective, the security is too big of a problem. So that's one bad solution. Another bad solution is to implement a solution where everything is kind of manual, where there is a lot of that context switching. Yeah, you're going to have conscientious devs who they care about security as part of their job, and they're going to do it no matter what. Even if you make it hard, they're going to do it. But we know that is not all devs, right? And it doesn't give you the coverage that you need, right? The devs who are most likely to be conscientious about that kind of thing were also the most likely to be really conscientious in their coding practices in the first place. So, they're going to have the fewest problems in the first place. What you want is coverage over all of your devs. And so using kind of manual processes, using free tools and kind of haphazard ad hoc, it doesn't give you that kind of visibility over your organization from kind of a broad umbrella perspective.
Interesting. I'm curious, when your researchers were working on this report, kind of looking at the motivations, some of the reasons behind. Now, there's obviously the almighty dollar or whatever the currency is of your nation state, and that's certainly a big incentive for folks. It isn't always the reason. What are some of the other incentives why this might be introduced through packages?
Yeah, so we were actually really surprised to see that one of the biggest, one of the fastest rising areas where malicious packages are taking off is in this area called protestware. So right now, there's conflict in Russia and the Ukraine. People have incredibly strong feelings about that conflict, and some of those people who have those really strong feelings are maintainers of open source packages. People are releasing packages that work exactly the way that they should. They contain all of the code that the original library did, except there's a little bit of malicious code in there that's buried deep. And what it says is, if you find that you are in Russia, if you're deployed on a computer in Russian territory, start deleting files, start wreaking havoc. And, so for a lot of organizations, this package would actually function perfectly normally, like a regular package. It's only when it's in that geographic region. And when you hear that, okay, so this is the start of it, right? But apply this to geopolitical conflicts going forward, and thinking about the fact that these are quadrupling year on year, the amount of this kind of protestware could be really, really significant as time goes on as well.
It's the kind of thing that can easily slip in and nobody notices until
yes,
right,
exactly, because it's a good imposter. It has all of the code it's supposed to have. It just has that little extra payload. That's something special.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you talked about exfiltration of data, things like that. Obviously, stealing people's data. There's also brand damage, things like that. Other motivations, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that can also, and a lot of times that comes down to money at the end of the day as well, because your customers' data is incredibly valuable. And, this is a place where I kind of foresee that there's going to be lawsuits that happen because of the exfiltration that goes on, because sometimes these packages can be hiding for months or years in code, and nobody knows that it's there, and it's just quietly doing this the entire time.
Interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I know spam was one of the issues when I was looking at the report. Was also, I usually think of just spam as things I have to worry about in my inbox. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we noticed that there were a lot of spam packages that basically existed to create spam, to produce spam, and there were also some of what we identified were just created by suspect publishers. These are publishers who in the past have created malicious packages or have created spam packages. These are no longer trusted people. And so even though these might not be able to wreak the same kind of havoc that an exfiltration or a ransomware botnet sort of attack could launch, we still see these spam packages as being a problem. Anything that is from a non-trusted source, we see that as being a problem, and we identify all of those to our customers.
Very good. Tell us a little bit more about some of the risk vectors. What are some of the differences? Talk about attack and versus risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as risk vector trends go, we've kind of seen a few different risk vectors that we actually analyzed the malicious packages according to their risk type. We looked at the frequency and the distribution of those, and we kind of created a profile that is. First, we kind of excluded all those ones that are just spam. There were a whole bunch of those. We excluded the ones that were just from suspect publishers. And then we kind of took a look at the distribution within what was left. We found some crypto miners. We found some protestware. We found a lot of malicious obfuscated code and malware droppers. So these are, intended to put malware into your code. A lot of them were contacting external hosts. There's actually multiple vectors that are being used in some of these attacks, and the most common was exfiltrating sensitive user system data. That was 56% were doing that. They might also have the malware dropper. They might also have some of the malicious obfuscated code.
Interesting. Well, there's always say great things that come out of reports like that. Not great that those are happening, but great that we know about it so we can take action against it. If you had to kind of put a bow on it and sort of summarize for what the takeaways were from the research, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I think the takeaway is that you can't think of application security as just being about vulnerabilities. There is a bigger picture here, right? This is the supply chain, and the supply chain is becoming more complex. And the more complex it becomes, the more opportunities there are for attackers. So, looking beyond vulnerabilities into malicious packages and into just sort of thinking about AppSec as this broad, more umbrella category where attackers aren't just thinking about specific vectors. They're trying to look for the easiest way in, and we're going to have to stay a step ahead of them.
Excellent. Well, we're almost, RSA is almost upon us, RSAC. I presume you're going to be there as well?
Yes. Men.io is going to be there. We will have a terrific booth. You'll be able to set up meetings and talk with us in a little private room right there.
Excellent. And you can download this report on the men.io site. I know I've gone there myself and picked it up. And we also have a show we're working on together, a video series on TechStrong TV, AppSec Today. So go to techstrong.tv, definitely check that as well. Lots of good resources, lots of great, that's the thing. We all need help, right? We all benefit from the work that we do, and whether it's products, technologies, information, research, it's all helpful. So appreciate you contributing to that body of knowledge.
It's great to be here.
All righty, great to be talking with you. We'll see you, Jeanette, at RSAC, and hopefully on a future interview, conversation, panel, or all of the above. We'll see you again. Definitely check out men.io.